Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Terumot. We're up to Perik Zayin Mishna Aleph. Today's Mishnah should be Le'il Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Aranbai v'Neliyahu ben Burcha Israelov Menuchatam Began Eden. Amen. We learned in the previous chapter that a non-Kohen who committed the sin of eating terumah by mistake must pay the principal plus a fifth. We said that principal is the value of the terumah that he ate. And when we say a fifth, we mean a quarter of the principal, which is a fifth of the final total. He has to make the payment with tithe produce, which then becomes terumah. No Kohen can release him from having to pay. He cannot forgive it because the Torah requires him to pay it. Now, these halachot we said apply only to one who committed the sin by mistake. Today's Mishnah is going to discuss about one who sinned knowingly. He knew that the food was terumah, and he knew the severity of the sin. And the Rav, as an introduction, the Rav explains to us that if a non-Kohen deliberately commits the sin of eating terumah, he is liable to the punishment of mitah b'dei shamayim, death at the hands of heaven. If two witnesses saw him eat the terumah immediately after they or someone else warned them of the severity of the sin, the court would punish him with malkut. Now, in the case where he was warned, the Gemara tells us a very interesting concept that lokeh ve'eno mishalem. In the case where he was warned and is liable to malkut, he would not be obligated to pay the Kohen anything, because it's a general rule that someone who commits a sin that makes him liable to both malkut, lashes, being whipped, and a monetary payment, he receives only the lashes but does not have to pay. So the Rav points out to us that our Mishnah, which speaks of the payment that the person has to make, must be referring to someone who was not warned. Must be referring to someone who was not warned and therefore did not become subject to the lashes. Now, the Rav says it is true that he's still liable to midah b'dei shamayim, death at the hands of heaven, but that punishment would not exempt the sinner from payment. Only the lashes would exempt him, and here, since he was not warned, he would not receive lashes, and therefore he would still have to pay. So the Mishnah says, Ha'ochel terumah mezid. If someone ate terumah knowingly, mishalem et hakeren ve'eno mishalem et hachomesh. He pays the principal because he has to compensate the owner for the theft of his terumah, but he does not pay the fifth. And the Mefarshim explain why. Because this extra payment is only imposed on one who ate terumah by mistake. Even the Mefarshim explain, even the extra payment, this fifth, cannot atone for someone who committed the major sin of eating terumah on purpose. He has sinned so severely, the Mefarshim explained, that a mere monetary payment would not be enough for his atonement. He would require a far greater punishment, which is what we call mitah b'dei shamayim. Now, nevertheless, he has to pay the principal because the principal is needed to compensate the Kohen for his loss, for you stealing his terumah. The Mishnah continues, hatashlumin chulin. If he pays with produce, he doesn't have to pay with produce, he could pay with money, but the Mishnah says if he pays with produce, hatashlumin chulin, the payment remains regular produce and does not become terumah, unlike we said by shogeg, unintentional, the produce that you pay becomes terumah, here it will stay chulin. Im ratza kohen imchol mochel. If the Kohen wants to forego the payment, he can do so, because since the purpose of paying is only to compensate the Kohen for his loss, the Kohen can release him from having to pay, whereas by shogeg, by unintentional, we explained, a Kohen cannot forgive the payment because not only is he compensating the Kohen, but he's also paying because the Torah requires him to pay the fifth. That is in Rabotai Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet continues to discuss if the daughter of a Kohen marries a non-Kohen, she is no longer allowed to eat terumah. However, if her husband dies or divorces her and she has no children from him, she returns to her father's household and she may eat terumah as before. But if her husband was a disqualified person, which we will explain what that is, she permanently loses her Kohenet status or Kohanic rights, and she may never eat terumah again. And the Mefarshim explain, based off the Torah in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 22, pasuk 12 to 13, and Masechet Yevamot, page 68, daf A to B, that a disqualified person includes any man that she is forbidden to marry, like a mamzer. Also included is a halal. A halal is the child of a union between a Kohen and a woman whom Kohanim are forbidden to marry, like a divorcee. Now, although the daughter of a Kohen is allowed to marry a halal, a child that came from a forbidden union of a Kohen to a divorcee, she can no longer eat terumah once she does so. The Mishnah teaches us the following halachot. Bat Kohen sheniset liYisrael v'achar kach achlat teruma. If the daughter of a Kohen married a Yisrael and then she ate teruma by mistake, which she's not allowed to do, Mishalemet et hakeren ve'ena mishalemet et hachomesh. She pays the principal because she has to compensate the owner for the loss. Mishalemet et hakeren ve'ena mishalemet et hachomesh. She pays the principal because she must compensate the owner for his loss, but she doesn't pay the extra fifth because in this respect, she is still a Kohenet. Right? And the Mefarshim explain, only a stranger to the Kehuna who eats teruma by mistake has to pay the fifth. This woman is not a stranger to Kehuna because she's a daughter of a Kohen, and technically she can eat teruma again if her non-Kohen husband dies or divorces her and she has no children from him. So therefore the Rav says, even though she's not allowed to eat teruma now, if she did by mistake, she's exempt from the extra fifth penalty. Now, since she's paying only for the sake of compensating the owner, the halakha that we said in the previous Mishnah applies, that if she pays with produce, it does not become teruma, and the Kohen can release her from having to pay. Umitata bisrefa, and the Mishnah continues, if she commits adultery, her form of the death penalty is burning, which is a special punishment imposed upon a Kohenet who commits adultery. And the Mefarshim explain, when the Torah states that a Kohen's daughter who commits adultery should be punished with srefa, with burning, it includes both one married to a Kohen and one married to a Yisrael. However, if she married any one of the disqualified people, now, even though the Mefarshim explain, even though it says she married, it's the same thing if she had intimate relations with them, she's no longer treated as a Kohenet, Mishalemet Keren v'chomesh. Therefore, if she eats teruma by mistake, she pays the principal and the fifth, because since she can never go back to eating teruma, even if her husband dies or divorces her, she's considered a stranger to Kehuna and she has to pay the fifth. Umitata bechenek, and if she commits adultery, her form of the death penalty is chenek, choking, like by the case of a regular Jewess. And the Mefarshim explain that the Torah says specifically the penalty of burning applies to the daughter of a Kohen. According to Rabbi Meir, the Rav says this woman lost her status as the daughter of a Kohen when she married the disqualified person, because she can never return to her father's house to eat this teruma. Right? Divrei Rabbi Meir, the Mishnah says these are the words of Rabbi Meir, v'chachamim omrim, but the sages disagreed. The sages say, Zu vezu mishalmot et hakeren ve'ena mishalmot et hachomesh umitatan bisrefa. The sages disagree with Rabbi Meir, that the sages say both this one and this one, both a Kohen's daughter who married an ordinary man and a Kohen's daughter who married a disqualified man, they remain subject to the laws of the Kehuna, meaning if they ate teruma by mistake, they pay the principal and the fifth, and if they commit adultery, mitatan bisrefa, they are put to death by srefa. The Mefarshim explain, the Mefarshim explain, the Chachamim, the sages hold that a woman is not considered a stranger to the Kehuna unless she was never allowed to eat teruma. Therefore, a daughter of a Kohen who cannot be a stranger if she married a disqualified person, since she was permitted to eat teruma at one point before she was married, she's exempt from having to pay the fifth. And the Mefarshim also add that why is the Chachamim hold mitatan b'srefa, that if they commit adultery, they're put to death by srefa? Because according to the Chachamim, the daughter of a Kohen retains that status even if she marries a disqualified person. Therefore, when the Torah says that the daughter of a Kohen is subject to death by srefa, it includes her as well. And the Rav tells us, B'alakha kechachamim, the halakha follows the opinion of the sages, that in any case, both this daughter of a Kohen who married Israel and this daughter of a Kohen who had intimate relations and married somebody that she's not allowed to be with, she would, if she ate by accident teruma, she would only pay principal and not pay the fifth. And if she, God forbid, committed adultery, her death penalty would be serafa, would be burning. That is in Rabotai, today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.